religion. He's also the white professor at large at Cornell University here in the United States. Bassam Tibi was born in Damascus, and he descends from a centuries-old family, the Banu al-Tibi family of Damascus. And it's a notable family, and he traces his ancestry to the Prophet Muhammad. He moved to Germany in 1962 and received his education in Damascus in Islamic schools and Western-style schools before going to Europe. He completed his high school education in Syria in a French school system. His academic training in the social sciences, philosophy, and history was at the Goethe University in Frankfurt, where he received his first PhD in 1971. Among his teachers, I think most importantly and notably, are Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno, as well as Habermas and Irving Fletcher. Professor Tibi received his German super PhD from the University of Hamburg later on. After teaching in Frankfurt and Heidelberg universities, Dr. Tibi was appointed in 1973 as a professor for international relations. He went on to found the Center for International Affairs at Goethe University, and he's been the director ever since. Professor Tibi has taught all over the world. I'll just very briefly, because I can speak here for 30 minutes, with all your accomplishments. He was teaching at Harvard University and has been a visiting professor in the United States, not only at Harvard, but at Princeton, Berkeley, and Ann Arbor. He taught in Turkey, Sudan, and Cameroon as well. So the list goes on. He's also extremely well published on issues that we are concerned with in the seminar series. He has 6 books in English and 26 books in German. His books have been translated into more than 16 languages. And he writes mostly with about Islamic civilization, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean region. He's been published in journals such as the Journal of Middle Eastern Studies, Millennium, the Fletcher Forum, and the list goes on and on. So it's really an honor and a privilege, and actually Professor Tibi's been here for the week, so it's really been wonderful to be able to speak with him and to meet with him. I'm sure you'll enjoy this lecture. The lecture's title today is Bringing Anti-Semitism Back to Europe, the Virus of Anti-Semitism in the European Diaspora of Islam. So, Professor Tibi.
Thank you for coming. I promised Charles not to talk longer than 40 minutes in order not to bore you, and also to have enough time for the debate. It's now, shortly it's 4:30, so I'll be stopping around 10 after 5. Yeah. I'm a social scientist. But I was trained in philosophy at the Frankfurt School, so these were the first Jews I met in my life. There's a Jewish quarter in Damascus where I was born and where I grew up, but most of the Jews of Damascus left. They put it in Arabic, Hayy al-Yahud, so I was there a couple of times. There's also a synagogue there, but in Damascus I did not manage to meet a Jew. That was the first time in Frankfurt. And these two giant scholars, I mean, they are considered in Europe as the philosophers of the history of the 20th century, and it was a great honor to study with them. When I came to Frankfurt, I didn't know who they are, and so I learned from them to use the terms in a very clear meaning. When you employ, this is a German philosophical tradition. When you are educated as a philosopher, you learn how to handle notions in a very clear meaning. In German they say klare Begriffe. So I refer to this not for boosting of being their students, but for the lecture itself. For the lecture itself that I will be delivering here, it is based on 2 sections. In the first section, I will give some basic information about the issue, very important for understanding the Islam diaspora in Europe, of which I'm a part. In the second part of the lecture, I move to the topic itself. But the basic foundations for understanding the topic itself are very important. In the beginning, it is important to outline the terms that I will be employing, and second, the methodology. The founder of the sociology of religion was a French Jew. His name Emile Durkheim. He's in France. In France as Max Weber in Germany. And in my first year as a freshman in Frankfurt, I studied his Les règles de la méthode sociologique, the rules of the sociological method. And among these basic rules is to look at religion not as a text. An Orientalist or a theologian could look at religion as a text, but as a social scientist, you look at religion as a reality, in the language of Emile Durkheim, fait social. So I first will outline the terms that I will be employing, and please keep in mind, when I talk about Islam and Islamism, I do not talk about text, but I talk about reality. I talk about religion as a fait social. Yeah? It is very important from the very beginning to make clear that there's a distinction in all means, a distinction between Islam and Islamism. Islam is a religion, it is my religion as well, it is an ethics, it is a cultural system. Islamism, and Islam exists ever 610, the beginning of the Islamic revelation. Islamism is a recent, contemporary or recent, it is more than recent. It started as a Sunni phenomenon. There's also Islam, there's a Shi'i Islamism. We have here a great American Iranian scholar who talk about this. My focus will be on Sunni Islam. Sunni Muslims are about 90, there's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. About 90% of them are Sunnis, about 10% are Shi'is. There's a Sunni tradition and there's a Shi'i tradition of Islamism. And Islamism started as a Sunni phenomenon. So many people in the West think Islamism or political Islam started with Khomeini. Political Islam started in Cairo, 1928, with the Muslim Brotherhood as a Sunni phenomenon. And I will explain what is Islamism all about. Yeah? And the tradition, one can talk about the kind of nasty tradition of anti-Semitism in Islamic civilization. It is not related to Islam, it is related to Islamism. So, again, in a philosophical manner, there's the German philosopher Fichte argues, sagen Sie mir, welche Begriffe Sie haben, und ich sage Ihnen, was für Philosophen Sie sind. Tell me the notions you are employing, and I'll tell you what kind of philosopher you are. There are two basic ideas in my presentation, and I'll present them at the very beginning. The first I start with stating with the authority of the historian Bernard Lewis that neither in the history nor in the religion of Islam, one finds any variety of anti-Semitism. In contrast, one encounters in Islamic Spain a Jewish Islamic tradition, and Bernard Lewis talks in his book The Jews of Islam that in Islamic Spain a kind of Jewish Islamic synthesis, cultural synthesis developed. I know this from Jewish historian that Spain is considered Judaism as a religion is much older, but Spain is the birthplace of cultural traditions in Judaism with Maimonides and others, and this was incorporated in a Jewish Islamic synthesis. Yeah? The distinction of Bernard Lewis, whom I'm referring as an authority, is twofold. First, he's a Jewish scholar of high caliber, and at the same time, he's a historian of Islam, so he knows what he's talking about. Yeah? So having stated that with the authority of Bernard Lewis, and with reference to his research, in particular the classic, The Jews of Islam, that in Islam, as a tradition, as a culture, as a civilization, and as a religion, one finds no anti-Semitism. I add in the second statement that today there is an anti-Semitism in the world of Islam, and unfortunately, I'm a scholar, I have to tell the truth, it is a spread virus. Yeah? So having stated that I do not engage in contradiction, I hope I do not, and I think I do not engage in interdiction when I state that the virus of anti-Semitism is widespread in the world of Islam today, particularly in the Middle East. I lived in many parts of the world of Islam. So for instance, 2005, I lived almost a year in Indonesia. There is also there anti-Semitism, but it's very, very tenuous. Yeah? In the Middle East, not only in the Arab part of it, but also in Turkey and in Iran, one faces an anti-Semitism. And in my lecture, in the title of my lecture, you will find the term back, bringing back. And the implication is that the world of Islam is not the home of anti-Semitism. The home of anti-Semitism and the origin of it is Europe, and now anti-Semitism is coming back to its home, to Europe. However, anti-Semitism at the beginning, it had no roots. It was an import from outside, but I'm sorry to tell you, it has been able to strike roots, and it is a problem now in the world of Islam. To illustrate this, 2 years ago, in the city of Basel, there was a meeting of 250 presidents of Jewish communities throughout Western Europe. And to the first time in the history of such meetings, they placed on the agenda the topic of Islamist anti-Semitism. And being a Muslim living in Europe, I am familiar with the fears of Jews in France, in Norway, in Germany. I live partly in the city of Berlin. It is a real problem in Berlin. So the fears are not only related to Nazis who are harassing Jews, and these are in the fringe of the society, but now in the Islam diaspora there is such a thing. And it is a great wrong to be silent about it. People, maybe it's not in my notes, but I tell you this, there's a center, maybe I use this also to say something that I missed, I plan to say it. There are that I know 3 basic centers for the study anti-Semitism in the world. Two of them are in Germany, one is in Potsdam, and one is in Berlin. And this is the 3rd year, so I'm very happy to be here in one of the 3 basic centers for the study of anti-Semitism in the world. Professor Benz from the Humboldt University of Berlin, he was asked, and he was giving the money to study anti-Semitism in the Islam diaspora in Europe, particularly in Berlin. And his findings were alarming. And the money came from the European Union. There's a center of the European study. There's a center of the European Union based in Vienna, in Austria, for the study of racism. And under the assumption that anti-Semitism is one of the varieties of racism, the money came from this center, and the study was put in a closet, and it was closed, and it was not published. And there was a big scandal. That was 1.5 years ago, and the study was not published, and Professor Benz complained, and then instead of acknowledging the wrong, I mean that they did not publish the study because of its findings, and they at the beginning one started to argue, if we publish something like that, we contribute to Islamophobia. And then see, but I mean, anti-Semitism is a crime against humanity, and Islamophobia is also a crime. But how can you combat one crime and be silent about the other crime? And at the end, I mean, to put the thing right, they argued there are some methodological and technical mistakes in the study, and that's why it was not published. But the reality was it was not published because it is politically incorrect to say that in the Islam diaspora in Europe, there is an unfolding anti-Semitism. So now coming back to my notes, in Basel, 2005, it was this three days meeting of the 25 Jewish presidents of Jewish communities in Europe, and it is very laudable. They were really afraid to the bone, but they did not. And there are some Jewish scholars who work on the subject, and to ensure that these 250 presidents do not want to engage in fault lines between Islam and Judaism, they have chosen to invite a Muslim scholar to speak about the issue, to make sure that there is a need for a Jewish-Islamic alliance. And I'm very proud that I was the scholar chosen to talk about this issue. And I tried to put their mind at ease, however, without tampering with the facts, because the facts are on the ground. And they said, we need to establish a Muslim-Jewish alliance to combat both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. But in terms of language, I need here to add a distinction that I missed at the beginning. I distinguish between Judaophobia and anti-Semitism. Both are shameful and crime against humanity, but you see, phobia refers to prejudice in terms of language. If you have a phobia against something, so you dislike it. So phobia is related to prejudice, and Judaophobia existed in Islam earlier, but Judaophobia is not anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism means that it's a movement, it is a modern ideology, and anti-Semitism implies the call for not only to demonize the Jews, but also to extinguish them. And the reality of this ideology is Auschwitz. But there are people who do not like the Jews, but if you don't like the Jews, so you are Judaophobic, this is bad, but it is something different, like when you say the Jews should be extinguished, as the Nazis did. Yeah? And therefore, the equation of anti-Semitism with Islamophobia, even though I say it as a Muslim, is wrong, because there are in Europe, there's in Europe Islamophobia, but those Europeans who dislike Islam and have prejudice about Islam, they don't say 1.6 billion Muslims should be extinguished. But the anti-Semites do that. Yeah? Well, I mean, today they don't do it, but those who are committed to this is their discourse. Yeah? It is very important for understanding what is Islamist anti-Semitism is to draw to some historic, to provide some overview, and then I will turn to the subject itself, anti-Semitism in Europe, in the Islam diaspora. Yeah? I come back to the distinction between Islam and Islamism. Islam is a religion, faith, an ethic, and Islamism is an ideology. I was among the advisors of the American Army, American Armed Forces at the Naval War College. They recruited 5 experts. The other 4 were Americans. I was the only non-Americans. 1 year ahead of the Iraq War. I was against the Iraq War. I'm against Saddam Hussein. I'm very happy he's no longer in place. And I am one of the victims of Saddam Hussein because his intelligence tried 3 times to assassinate me between 90 and 91. So I cannot say one positive word about Saddam, so I'm happy he's gone. But when I was consulting the American Army, I advised him not to go to war, because I said the war, I mean, this will create a vacuum, and then this will give a boost to Islamism. And then one of the generals asked me, you see, Professor Tibi, I'm a humble soldier, I'm a general. I have no time to read books and to do any inquiries. Can you explain to me in a very simple language what is the difference between Islam and Islamism? And I told him, if you speak to a Muslim, you ask this Muslim, what is Islam for you? It is Islam for you a faith, a belief in God, and an ethic and a way of life, I mean a cultural system? Or is Islam also a political order? Is Islam an order for the state? And if this person says Islam is an order for the state, then you are dealing with a fundamentalist, or an Islamist. So in the Quran, I know the Quran by heart, and this is the first book I read in my life when I was in the age of 5 in Damascus. The term state, dawla in Arabic, politics, siyasa, nizam, system, do not occur in the Quran. And the Islamists say they want to establish a system of government based on the Sharia. The term Sharia occurs only once in the Quran. And the verses, I mean, 80 to 90% of the Muslims, including educated Muslims whom I met in my life, ask him about the Sharia, and they don't know that the term Sharia occurs only once in the Quran, and the term in Surah Jathiyah, وَثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاكَ مِنْهَا شَرِيعَةٌ بِالْأَمْرِ فَاتَّبِعُوهَا. We have given you a Sharia, so live after it. And Sharia means here a way of life, morality, not a legal system. And the Islamic legal system in Sunnah Islam was first developed in the 8th century, and at the time only as a civil law and as a penal code, not as a state law, as a political law. This happened only later within the framework of political Islam. So political Islam or Islamism, I mean, there are many words for that. This is confusing. You can say fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamism. The French say integrism, or political Islam. In Arabic, they prefer the term Islam as-siyasi, political Islam, or Islamism. So Islamism is the politicization of religion. And I have coined a term in English for that. I mean, religion is a noun, but you can make a verb out of it. English is a nice language, you can play around with it. The religionization of politics. Religionize. And so Islamism is a politicization of Islam and religionization of politics. And if you transform this to the attitudes of Muslims toward Jews, you transform an existing Judeophobia. I mean, I must acknowledge Judeophobia is in place, and it is much older than the contemporary history. But Judeophobia is related. We can talk maybe during the discussion about it. Judeophobia is not anti-Semitism, and so political Islam transfers Judeophobia into anti-Semitism, and this anti-Semitism has an antecedents, and these antecedents, they are in Europe. The entry of this anti-Semitism is a modern ideology, and the idea of getting rid of the Jews, which became reality in Auschwitz, is related to modern times. Even in, well, I talk with historians. I mean, even in medieval Europe, of course. I mean, these are roots, historical roots of anti-Semitism. But a call to extinguish the Jews did not exist before modern times. Before anti-Semitism started to unfold, it predates Hitler. It started in France in the 19th century. And this thinking came to the Middle East via Muslims and Christians. There were more, in the 19th century, there were more Christian Arabs. Well, actually the beginning of Arab anti-Semitism, it was not Islamic, it was Christian. Christians who came from France, and they brought this virus with them. And it was embraced later by Muslims. And so you have in the Middle East secular anti-Semitism, At the beginning, it was within Arab nationalism, but this is not the major trait of Arab nationalism. I would say more about it. But it became authentic in the ideology of political Islam, authentic in the understanding, say this is not an import, this is a part of our thinking. Yeah? And this anti-Semitism predates the creation of Israel, because many people say this is a response to the creation of the state of Israel. And anti-Semitism in the Middle East predates also political Islam, because as I stated earlier, there existed, political Islam exists ever since, it started 1928 in Cairo. Secular anti-Semitism started in the late 19th century, and it came with Christian, Arabs, Lebanese, and Syrians who studied in France and came back with this virus. And then, well, there is one confusion between Judeophobia and anti-Semitism. Both, I mean, to be sure, both to me are crime against humanity. But you know, there are crimes to varying degrees. Yeah, and I have explained that. There is another confusion between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Well, actually, logically and rationally, you can establish this difference and say you can be anti-Zionist without being anti-Semitic, but in reality today, and the president of Iran is the best example for this, Ahmadinejad, when he organized a conference, A Wall Without Zionism, and I mean, when you look at it, it is not a wall without Zionism, it's a wall without Jews. Yeah? Therefore, we have to beware of the covering of anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. And sometimes when I listen to the people, not only to the president of Iran, when they're talking about, for instance, in Arabic, they don't say as-Sahyuniyun, the Zionists. They equate Zionism with Judaism, so they're talking about Jews in general. Yeah? So political Islam. Since the lecture is not about political Islam, but it's very important to understand political Islam as a root of this. Political Islam started 28 with the creation of the Society of Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. In other words, it started with Sunni Islam and only later on in Shia Islam. Sunni political Islam started to replace Arab nationalism and pan-Arabism after the defeat in the 60 War, 1967. So the breakthrough of political Islam was in the 60s, after 1967. I have to make some note about Arab nationalism. Arab nationalism has two phases. The early Arab nationalism was under impact of French thought, and you can call it a Francophile Arab nationalism, and it was relatively free of anti-Semitism, relatively. Yeah? In the second period, after 1913, there was a second phase in Arab nationalism. It is Germanophile Arab nationalism. So the impact of France, or the impact of French thought, was replaced by German thought. And here you can trace the very beginning of anti-Semitism in the Middle East. In the late 19th century, and the height was, the turning point was 1913. For more about this, I will not go deeper into it because I don't have the time. If you excuse me, I mean, it's allowed in the United States. In Germany, this will be considered as commercial, but in the United States, allowed to make a reference to one own book. My book, this is among my books, is the basic one, Arab Nationalism Between Islam and the Nation State, and you find all these things inside. And in this book, you will find little about anti-Semitism, or almost no mentioning of anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism started with Arab nationalism, but really on the side. That was not a major trait. But in political Islam, anti-Semitism is very essential. And if you, the major thinker of political Islam is Sayyid Qutb, and Sayyid Qutb wrote a full book, Ma'arakatuna Ma'al Yahud, our battle against the Jews, and he he is of the view, in this book, about 110 pages, there is a cosmic war between Islam, and Judaism. But this war does not exist in reality. It is a constructed war, and it is related to this import of anti-Semitism from outside. But Sayyid Qutb is anti-Western, and unlike the Arab nationalists who acknowledge their European sources, he says, what I am telling you, this is authentic Islam. And his authentic Islam is fascist Islam, yeah? And this is an import from outside, but it's presented as authentic, yeah? I came to Germany in 1962, and at that time there were literally few thousand Muslims living in Germany. Now we are in Germany now 4 million, and in the European Union we are 20 million. In the year 1950, there were throughout Europe, Western Europe, you have to distinguish between Europe, Western Europe, and Southeastern Europe. In Southeastern Europe, there are about 10 million ethnic Europeans who are Muslims. So this is a different community. My focus is in Western Europe, or what is today the European Union. And in the countries of the European Union, we are now 20 million. And in the year 1950, there were no European Union by then. In Western Europe by then, there were 800,000 Muslims living there, less than 1 million. So within 50 years, the number jumped from 800,000 to 20 million. To make sure here at this point, among these 20 million Muslims living in Western Europe, I can guarantee you, I mean, this is not just only to put your mind at ease, at least 90%, maybe even more, among these people, these are decent people who have nothing to do with anti-Semitism and also not with political Islam. Having stated that, and also I add to this, in Berlin, for instance, in Berlin, there are 2 initiatives, Muslim-Jewish initiative against anti-Semitism. So you have this alliances. Alliance is always against somebody, and so there are in many places in Europe, and I know these 2 initiatives in Berlin, and I'm active also in them. Islamic Jewish Alliance or Initiative against Anti-Semitism. But I'm again as a scholar and I'm as a person close to reality. Some people use the information that the Islamists in the Islam diaspora, they are between 3%, in some countries they are 3%, in others, like in Netherlands, 10%, they use this information to belittle of political Islam in Europe. This is wrong, because this very tiny minority from 3 to 10% is powerful, they have resources, they control mosques, and they are the representative of political Islam. For instance, in Germany, there are 4 organizations of organized Islam, and there's empirical research about this. They represent maximally 12% of the Muslims living in Germany. But they claim in public, because they are organized, they control the mosque, they say we are the voice of Islam. Not all of, I mean, one organization of them is related to the Turkish state, is not political Islam, but Milli Gurush, the Muslim Brothers, are in, and they are anti-Semitic, clearly anti-Semitic. And so, how do Europeans grasp this phenomenon? That or put it the other way around. You have my article here on jihadist Islamism, just published in the British journal Totalitarian Movements and Political Religion. There is a flow of Islamic migration to Europe. And Europe now, if you look at statistics, comparing the incoming immigrants to the population, Europe is now receiving more immigrants than the United States, more than Canada, and more than Australia, the classical countries of immigration. So Europe is becoming a continent of immigration, and the Europeans are not ready for this. I have lived for 44 years in Germany. I am a German citizen, but in Germany I'm not accepted as a German. And I'm not also treated as a German. I mean, this is, you cannot understand this. He's in America. If you come and live 2 years here and become an American citizen, then you are a member of the community. And so this, the Islamists use this. There is a kind, the Muslims in Europe, with few exceptions, they live in their own world. They live in enclaves or parallel societies. And the Islamists, they try to abuse, to politicize the discontent among Muslims because of the lack of integration. And what we're talking about, anti-Semitism, is part of this. And Europeans are not ready to become, to live with the reality that they are becoming a continent for immigration. In Germany, they were tampering with the statistics. They say the foreigners living in Germany, there are 7 million. But this number has not changed in the past 15 years. And I say, I'm not the scholar involved in statistics, but this cannot be true. If you go to Berlin, to Frankfurt, you see people who do not look like German, and you see them, this is a kind of majority. But finally, last year, the very first time in German history, that the Bundesamt für Statistik in Wiesbaden acknowledged that 20% of the people living in Germany, the politically correct language is mentioned with Migrationshintergrund, people with migratory background. So it means non-Germans, yeah? 20%, yeah? But if you look at German television, you will never see a face which is not German. But we see we are 20%. We are, I am one of 3 Muslims. In Germany, we are 4 million. I am one of 3 Muslims who are professors, full professors. We are not more than that. Yeah? And so the Islamists used this situation and now relating this situation to anti-Semitism. So Europeans are not able to deal with these changed realities, and also, I mean, in Germany, it is. I mean, I have to say something favorable now to Germany. There are different standards of awareness of anti-Semitism throughout Europe. After Auschwitz, after Hitler, and I must praise Germany. I mean, because I came to you from Austria, yeah? And in Austria they did not deal, they did not process their Nazi. They have also a Nazi past, yeah? But they just put it aside and they don't deal with it. But the Germans dealt with it courageously, and in Germany is almost the only country in Europe where it is a legal offense if you talk anti-Semitic language. It's not part of freedom of speech to talk anti-Semitic. If you talk anti-Semitic, you end up in a jail. You first in a court and then in jail. But the problem is, if you are really against anti-Semitism, then you must accept this in general. So, and I'm going to tell you a story to make it clear, not so academically abstract, how anti-Semitism is dealt with in Germany. If a German will make any notice about Jews, like one of the former combatants of Bader-Meinhof, his name was Mahler, left wing, and he ended up with the NPD, I mean with the Nazis. And he made some quote-unquote critical remarks about the Jews. He had a trial and he's now in jail. Yeah? But in the year 2000, 2 synagogues in Düsseldorf and in Essen were desecrated, and that was scandalous in Germany. How could a synagogue be desecrated in Germany after Auschwitz? Germans and Germany cannot afford this. And there was an outrage for almost 3 weeks throughout the country. And the then Chancellor, Mr. Schroeder, he went to Düsseldorf and he met Paul Spiegel. Paul Spiegel is the president of the Jewish community, and he asked him for apology. He said, I mean, on the assumption that German Nazis did it. And really, for 3 weeks, where in the evening, were people walking on the streets in all major cities in Germany with candles, asking for apology. That 2 synagogues were desecrated in Düsseldorf and in Essen. But after 3 weeks, the police found out that the perpetrators were not Germans, they were Islamists, Palestinians and Moroccans. And they were arrested. And then Chancellor Schröder coined the term Aufstand der Anständigen, the upheaval of the decent people against anti-Semitism. And then when it became public, the perpetrators were not Germans, the appraisal ended and nothing happened. And during the trial, it turned exactly in the other direction. They said these people, the lawyers argued in front of the court, these people are not anti-Semites, they were only expressing their outrage about what's going on in Palestine, and the outrage in the German public switched into an understanding. Really, that was, and the people became very minor sentence, and the story was finished. Yeah, and I published an article. I wrote an article about that at the time. Is Islamist anti-Semitism less harmful than Nazi anti-Semitism? And no German newspaper was willing to. I am not only a scholar; I'm columnist in newspapers. No German newspaper was willing to publish that article until the year after, in January 2001, a gang of Islamists they catched Rabbi Rothschild in Berlin and they smashed him. I mean, he was bleeding and was brought to the hospital. And it was what, I mean, the people were arrested and said they were again Islamists doing that. And only then the daily journal Die Welt was willing to publish the article. And I'm very proud of it. It's half a page. Said Islamist, anti-Semitic Islamism is right-wing as much as Nazi right-wing is. And that was debated. This anecdote makes clear that the ideology of multiculturalism, you see, in Germany, I come from the left wing. I was one of the leaders of the student revolt in the 60s in Frankfurt. I'm a Muslim, I'm alien in Germany, I'm an immigrant, and I have nothing to do with the right wing. But if you criticize on multiculturalism, but the same in the United States, if you criticize on multiculturalism, then you are a right wing. Yeah? And I was criticizing on multiculturalism because I argue we want to live together. I mean, we are 20% of the German population is ethnically not German, and we want to live with one another in peace, and we accept the principle of diversity. I go for diversity, and I would fight for it and sacrifice my life for it, as much I would sacrifice my life for my religious faith. Cultural diversity is about everything, however, with limitations. If somebody speaks anti-Semitic, I would not accept this within the framework of freedom of speech, of diversity. But in Europe, diversity means no limits. I mean, because people say, for instance, I would never, I mean, to move away from anti-Semitism, to show you, I mean, this is in other areas, if somebody commits circumcision, I mean, you have a daughter, you have a sister, and if you do this, this is a crime. This is a mutilation, actually. And they say, but this is the culture. This is the culture of the people. You cannot accept it in the name of diversity. But they say, people say, I won't do that to my female relatives. But if an Arab or an African did it, I have to accept it. It is their culture. This is respect for their culture. I do not respect that. So crimes against humanity have no religion, have no culture, and anti-Semitism belongs to this category. So you cannot say if anti-Semitism is done by Germans, then it is a legal offense. But if it's done by non-Germans, then you have to accept that this is only outrage about blah blah blah. Yeah. The problem is in here. I still have 3 to 4 minutes. Just come to my conclusions. Not just to stop like this. It is important when we're talking about Islamic migration to Europe to make 2 differentiations. First, a historical distinction. After the Second World War, there was an Islamic community in Western Europe of about 800,000, less than 1 million. They were basically in France and in Great Britain, and this is part of the colonial legacy. Germany, Scandinavia, and other parts of Europe, there were individual Muslims. As I told you, I came in October '62 to Germany, and I was among a few exotic Muslims just walking around. Yeah? This has changed in the course of the time. Now today, all countries of Europe have migrants, and between 10 up to 30% of the people living are not ethnic Europeans, come from Asia, Africa, from the Middle East, and the Muslim proportion is between 40 and 50%. And that's why the Muslim community in Europe is the biggest single community among the migrants. Yeah? The second thing is, and I have stated it, and I have to repeat it, the majority of Muslims living in Europe are decent people, and they come to Europe for a better life. Yeah? I think it would be a great mistake of one accuses the Muslim community as a whole of jihadism, because this happens since 9/11, of jihadism, of anti-Semitism. It is a minority within the community, but to refer to the argument of minority is not only to protect the majority from accusations, it should be also added, one should add to it the fact that it is a very active minority, is a dangerous minority, is powerful minority, is organized minority, rich of resources, and the worst thing is they control most of the mosques throughout Europe. And that's why we need a counter strategy, and this counter strategy has to be educational. And I am the founder of European Islam. I established a concept of European Islam 1992 in France, in Paris, and I get support from there. I get support also from the Dutch government, partly earlier from the Swedish government. And you see, we have to keep young Muslims, boys and girls born in Europe, out of the impact of these people. Keep them out of the education in the mosque, and try to screen the mosque, and also to make sure that speech of hatred in mosques should not be allowed within the freedom of speech. In England, Blair, whom I don't like because his advisor is an Islamist, but he tried to enforce a legislation in the parliament to outlaw hatred speech, and his party, the majority of people in the party did not support him, so that was not successful. So I mean, hatred speech and anti-Semitism is part of it, is allowed within the freedom of speech, not in Germany. Yeah? And here Germany is better off than Great Britain. Yeah? Let me now come to my conclusion. It is very important here maybe there is a Europe at the moment, there is a fight for the soul, for the hearts and soul of the migrants. Yeah? And Europe is not doing a good job in this. Yeah? And I finish maybe with a scenario. There's a you know the newspaper Financial Times, and there's a German edition of it. And last year they published a scenario of what's going to happen in Germany in the next 10 years. So how will German university look in the next 10 years? How the German economy will look in the next 10 years? How German democracy will look in the 10 years? And they took for each of these areas an expert. And as an expert on Islam, not only because I'm a Muslim, but as a scholar working in Islam, I was asked, how would the Islamic diaspora in Germany look in 10 years? And I wrote a piece, and it was rephrased. I mean, to introduce the scenario not in my own phrasing, but in a phrasing of the editorial board of the newspaper. And it was published under the title "Junge Muslime werden sich an Deutschland rächen." Yeah? Young Muslims will revenge on Germany in 1 year. They said, and that what happened in France a year ago, the riots in the what you call the banlieue de l'Islam in English, the suburb of Islam. These are young boys and girls, mostly boys, because it was they speak barely Arabic. They speak French, and if they speak Arabic, they speak broken Arabic or none at all. They are born in France. In their countries of origin, in the Maghreb, they are not accepted. In France, they are not accepted, and they are not integrated in society. And they are susceptible to the propaganda of political Islam, including anti-Semitism. And in France, it is a real problem. And so, what can you do against this? A policy of integration, a policy of education, a policy of enlightenment, and one should also find a way not only to keep these young boys and girls born in Europe away of the impact of political Islam in Europe itself, but also from outside. Like if you go to Berlin, there is a television station by Hezbollah, is Al-Manar. If you look at it, and I look at it, it's 30 to 40% what they broadcast is anti-Semitism. Yeah? So this is their major subject. And this Al-Manar television is seen by many Muslims in Berlin. I see it and elsewhere. But here, what can you do about this? Yeah, I think here there's a war of propaganda, and there's a lack of integration. There's identity politics. What does Europe and the Europe response? They say we have learned from Auschwitz, and the lesson of Auschwitz: we are now multiculturalists. We are open to all, including, I add to it, you are open also to Islamist anti-Semitism. This you have not learned from Auschwitz. One of my friends and colleagues in Germany, Professor Wolfson, Michael Wolfson, we fight together. He fights on the Jewish side, I fight on the Islamic side. Say, Germans did not learn from their past. And I think this can be extended also to all Germans. Because Europe has no strategy to deal with Islamist anti-Semitism and other undemocratic ideologies entering Europe in the name of multiculturalism. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, so Ed, go ahead and I'll ask the question after. And if anybody wants to ask a question, please signal to me and I'll kind of create a list.
Okay, thank you, Professor Tibi. You said several times that the overwhelming majority of Muslims in Europe are not Islamists, and we don't accept that. You also said that the minority control all of the mosques. Most of the mosques. That's a huge problem. So my question is simply if the funds were available, would one reasonable strategy simply be to start a new system of independent mosques, as opposed to mosques which are sponsored by these groups? And then the second issue is, would people go to them?
There is one experience in France. It's the only experience. Now the Dutch are trying to emulate with this experience. In France, when you establish a mosque, you have to get the permission of the state. Yeah? It is not. People say the French are secular fundamentalists. This is nonsense. Yeah? But because in France, there's the principle of laïcité, the separation of religion and politics, and the appointment of an imam has to be approved by the state in France. In the established mosque in Lyon, in Marseille, in Paris, the imams are Democrats. I mean, I know some of them, and they are, you can be Democrat for the gallery, yeah, but these are really full-hearted Democrats. And there is an organization of organized Islam in France, they call it Conseil du Culte Musulman, Conseil Français du Culte Musulman. It is free of anti-Semitism, it is free of Islamism, and I recommend this in Germany, say, but this is an infringement of the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech, and so the states in Germany, but also in the UK, keeps out of this business. They say mosques are the business of civil society, and the state is not allowed to run in.
I'm not suggesting that the government do this.
Civil society.
I'm wondering why is it inside the Muslim community they don't do it themselves. In other words, if it's really true that the overwhelming majority of citizens reject Islamism, but yet most of the mosques are controlled by Islamists, then why not start your own system of mosques? It doesn't have to be the government which pays for it. They could perhaps help with the grant, but...
Well, I'm in a country here in the United States where civil society is very important. I am with you. I'm against, the state intervening, this is not my model.
Right.
I'm with you. But consider this, this is a fact. I have problem with this because I am against state intervention, but I ask for the help of the state without success. The situation is like this. In Germany, you see, in Germany I would say 90% of the Muslims living in Germany, they are not Islamists. Yeah? But these are individuals and they are not organized. And so this is, you see, amorphous mass, powerless, they cannot do anything. And the 10%, they have the mosques, they have the organization, they have the money, they have the infrastructure, and I fight against them. And you know what they say about me? You see, I can document this with all kinds of legal and scholarly documents. My family, Banu Tibi, descends from the Prophet. So I'm 100% Muslim. And this can be traced back throughout the centuries. And ethnically, I'm 100% ethnically Arab. Yeah? 100% Sunni Arab. Yeah? But my reputation in Germany, I'm a Jew, I'm a hidden Jew, and I have been brought by world Judaism. This is part of anti-Semitic ideology is thinking of conspiracy. So world Judaism introduced me to Germany and to undermine Islam within. And you see, I am one of 3 Muslim professors who are full professors in Germany. They say, how could he become a full professor if not the Jews are behind him? Yeah? And the Jews in Germany are not powerful, right? But this is, you see, these 90%, this is the problem. So what can we do? The 90% cannot do anything. In France, the state support, my friend is the grand imam of the Grand Mosque in Paris. His name is Dalil Boubacar, and we are 100% the same. But I am in Germany nobody. He is such an important man. Mr. Chirac receives him and treats him like a state man. And the Prime Minister of France goes to the mosque and pays official visit there. They get funds, they are supported. There is another one, the Grand Mufti of Marseille, his name is Shaykh, yeah? It's the same. But you see, so my dilemma is, I do not like, I like civil society. I am, by the way, I'm also a founding member of the Arab Organization of Human Rights. So it's not only a lip service to civil society, I believe in civil society, and I'm against etatism. But in this situation, people in France get the support of the state. Now in the Netherlands, the same is happening. Like they are training imams and saying we do not want to import imams from outside. We train imams in a democratic European mindset, and this is the way. And I think we have here to find a balance between organized civil society. For instance, the Christian churches do not support me and do not support European Muslims. The first question they ask me, who is behind you? Who is your constituency? He said, my reason is my power. He said, what's going to do with your reason? I would say, the Minister of Internal Affairs in Germany said, you must understand, I'm a politician. I deal only with people with constituency. You have no constituency, so I cannot deal with you. But the people of Medjugorje, this is right-wing, extremist right-wing, fascist, Islamist. They have 50% of the Turkish mosques in their control. They talk to them. They invite them. This is the situation. Yeah? So it's hopeless. Yeah?
I would like to ask you a question. You make a distinction between Judeophobia and anti-Semitism. So I understand you're saying that anti-Semitism is a 19th century European invention, and that there's, say, prejudice against Jews historically within Islam. You would call Judeophobia. So how useful is the distinction? So I'm thinking of Islamic forms of hatred of Jews in terms of writings that Jews are the descendants of monkeys and pigs, that the Quran speaks about the ethnic cleansing, if you will, of Jews from Saudi Arabia historically during the times of the Prophet. How important is this distinction given the resurgence of who we agree is anti-Semitism? Is there sort of certainly among Islamicists and others, is there a taking up Judeophobia or hatred against Jews that was in Islamic societies historically and is now becoming a part of anti-Semitism? Is this distinction important?
Well, the distinction is important for scholarly reasons, for analytical reasons, but I mean, I am not, I am like you, a scholar, I'm a professor, but I'm also a politician. I mean, because politics is not scholarship, yeah? And there are also political reasons. So you can do something for the sake of historical truth, but also there are political implications. I'm not just in the United States. I was a member of the Fundamentalism Project at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and at the beginning I presented scholarly analysis, and the director of the project, he said, but we get funding, yeah? And we need, what are the policy implications? Yeah? See, in Germany, I didn't learn that, I learned it here in the United States. So there are policy implications for this distinction. Islamists, quote, there are, in the Quran, there are phrases, some phrases which are favorable to the Jews, others are not. Yeah? And the Islamists, they quote the Quran selectively, and when they present their anti-Semitism, they say it is in the Quran, yeah? And they quote the Quran selectively. And I told you I know the Quran almost by heart. Well, I'm not so completely, but when I was younger, it was by heart. But I keep studying it as a Muslim, but also as a scholar. And there is no such thing. And in the Quran, it was like this. The Quran was revealed in Mecca at the beginning, from 610 to 622, and from 622 until the death of the Prophet, 623 in Medina. And when the Prophet moved from Mecca to Medina, he was dealing there with two tribes, the Aus and the Khazraj, and with Jews. There was a lot of Jews in the surrounding Medina, with the Jewish tribes. Yeah? And those of you who know Jewish theology very well and look at Islamic theology, you will find so many resemblances. Theologically, there's much more resemblance, or all the resemblance between Judaism and Islam than with Christianity, because both religions are very close to one another. Yeah? Like when you study halakha and sharia, you find, and among other things. Yeah? So the Prophet at that time, he was convinced that the first allies will be the Jews, and the Jews will convert to Islam and will be his primary allies. This did not take place, and he was highly disappointed. And so there's a biography of the Prophet written by a French scholar. He was in his time life, Maxime Robinson, a French of Russian Jewish origin. This is the best biography about the Prophet. The name is Muhammad. It exists in English, and I recommend it to you. And his interpretation is the Quran has two sections, I mean, the Meccan part, which is very general, and the Medinense part, what was revealed in Medina, which was, he states, quote unquote, it's a chronicle of events at that time. Yeah? So when the Prophet was in good terms with the Jews, the statements about the Jews were favorable. When he was in conflict with them, and at times they fought against one another, then the description of the Jews is not favorable. But the way I told you earlier, you know, this quote, that the Jews are monkeys, it does not exist in the Quran. I can assure you this as a student of the Quran, it does not exist. But they are unfavorable, and these unfavorable are you can call it Judeo-phobic, just the prejudice, or not favorable. Maybe it's better not favorable, just not, but they are not anti-Semitic. Yeah? And the anti-Semitic reading in these phrases is something which really alien to Islam. And I refer again to the authority of Bernard Lewis. Bernard Lewis is the best historian. I'm not the only one who says that. Bernard Lewis of Princeton, he's now 86 years old. Yeah? He's the best historian who's still alive on Islam. There's no one who could compete with him. And he says in his book, The Jews of Islam, there is no anti-Semitism in Islam, neither in the text nor in the tradition. And this, it started in the late 19th century by Arab Christians. And therefore, I mean, this is not only an academic knowledge, it is also a knowledge for dealing. When I talk to Islamists and they present Quranic verses, I must be in a position to refute them on Islamic grounds, because it is very important. They say, you are coming from outside, and referring, this is our, no, I refute your statements on Islamic ground, and therefore this distinction is very important. And to make Judeo-phobic statements in the Quran related to events, in order to deny these statements general meaning. This is bad, the distinction. It's not only analytical distinction.
May I ask you?
Sorry, excuse me, behind you. Sorry.
Well, the subject has recycled so much. I don't know how precisely I have to make it at this point, but the problem I was having with what I did enjoy in your remarks was the distinction between the politicized version of Islam and the cultural religious version of Islam. When you yourself acknowledge that in order for you to have any effective impact on Muslims, you have to politicize. So in other words, instead of distinguishing between the politicized negative Islamism and a apolitical, scholarly, decent Islamic population, I think you have to accept the reality that everything is political, and the solution has to be politics versus politics, a politicized Islam that is clear of destructive aspects. Because, so that's the first issue, is an agenda. Instead of relying on Germans or Russians or French or anybody to solve this problem, it goes back to that gentleman's comment, it's an Islamic issue. It's within Islam. Who controls the Islamic culture, the Islamic context? Just suburbs that are not integrating them? There's something in the faith, there's something in the culture that you're not addressing. And it goes back to the issue years ago when ecumenicism came about, many years ago. And I would go to conferences, and there would be a Catholic priest.
What's the question?
The question is, what is your plan to address the Islamic problem, not the the politicized issues that really belong in a negative barrel, but how do you get to be a political force that challenges the right of mosques to disseminate, etc., anti-Semitism, and for Muslims to be deeply anti-Semitic and anti-Israel?
Probably you will wonder, but I'm fully in agreement with you, and I will give you an evidence for this. Yeah, I'm an expert on Turkey. I mean, by origin, I'm Syrian. I'm from Damascus, but in the past 20 years, I was working on Turkey. I was professor in Ankara and Istanbul many times, and I publish in newspaper in Turkish. And so I'm accepted in Turkey because my grandfather was a general in the Ottoman army, Osmanli Pasha. And I am a secularist, and my friends in Turkey are the Kemalists, not the Islamists. And by the way, the Islamists are now ruling Turkey, the AKP party. Yeah? And my problem, when I got my first visiting professorship, 94 in Ankara, I gave my first lecture, and then the president of the university and the other Kemalists, they took me for dinner, and they said, Bassam, we think you are seculars like we are, and that's why we have invited you. But you speak of Islam, and are you fundamentalist? Did you change your mind? And I said, you didn't listen well to me. Yeah, as you said, you cannot do without Islam. Yeah, you know, they are pure secularists that take religion away, fully away, and this doesn't work. Because if you want to appeal, if you want to talk to the people, like we know I'm a human rights activist, when I talk to Muslims, I do not quote John Locke, I quote the Quran in my understanding to support what John Locke says. Yeah? And then people listen to me. But if I quote John Locke, nobody would listen to me. Yeah? And so I told the Kemalists, that was 94, if you do not embrace Islam in a political concept, you will lose. Because the Islamists are on the march. And my prediction is now reality. The Islamists rule Turkey since 4 years. The AKP party, they have 2/3 of the seats of the parliament. Yeah? Erdogan is 100% Islamist. Yeah? So my solution is, you know, is not to separate Islam from politics 100% in a secular dogmatic understanding. That wouldn't work. Then you can be as an intellectual lecturing at Yale with no impact. Yeah? You need to relate Islam to a concept without becoming an Islamist. And therefore, I distinguish between Islam as a political order, and this does not exist in the Quran. This is a reading of Islamists in the Quran. And when I talk to them, for instance, the Islamists, they say, in Turkish they say din devlet, in Arabic din wa dawla, they say Islam is based on the unity of state and religion. And I say, where do you have this from? They say, in the Quran. I say, can you quote? They cannot. And I say, if you look at the Quran, the term dawla, state, does not occur one single time. See, so I accept Islam as a political ethics. Distinction between Islam as a political ethics and Islam as a political order. Islam as a political order is totalitarian. And if you read my article, I hope you got one copy of the article here, this is an interpretation of Islam which leads to Islamism, and this is not the not authentic Islam, but it is appealing. And then you have a competition between two concepts of Islam, and therefore, especially even in Europe and the diaspora, in an age of identity politics, you know, Muslim youngsters they do not pray, they do not go to the mosque, but they need identity because European societies do not give them identity. Here in America, if you live, maybe after a while, America gives identity. Like when I'm talking in Germany, look, the ambassador, American ambassador in Baghdad is a Muslim, and he's now moving to New York. He will become American ambassador in the United Nations. Khalil Zadeh is a Muslim born Afghani. There's no such thing in Europe. Yeah? We are kept out. Yeah? And then people say, how do you defend these Europeans? They are doing all these harms to us, and you defend them. So, I mean, in short, if you argue without Islam, you are a loser. So you are right. And therefore, I developed a concept, I have developed a concept of European Islam, a reform Islam. Islam without jihad, without Sharia, Islam based on Islamic morality, and put it in line with constitutional values of European societies. And this advice has been listened to in the Netherlands, in France, and it has some reality there, but not in Germany, not in Scandinavia, not in Austria, not in Italy.
Okay, so
Thank
well,
you.
the gentleman there.
Two questions. One, I like your idea of European Islam and the way of separating the politicization, but I wonder if it really holds up historically, because when I think of how Islam spread in the beginning, from the Pyrenees to the Indus River, was it not through conquest, rule, the spread of the Arabic language and the Quran were the same process, and the whole rule of the caliphs, at least until the Ottomans, would not that have been politicized Islam? And my second question was about the hate speech and crimes, because it's my prejudice to answer speech with speech. Now that may be my American roots, but you present good reasons, and the European experience, of course, is much more deadly, and I can see the European need, perhaps, to limit hate speech. But if I were to write a book describing the crimes of American imperialism, would I not be accused of anti-American hatred and perhaps be subject to prosecution under hate speech laws myself? So where do you draw the line on what is really hate and what is criticism?
So the first question is easy to answer. I mean, my concept, maybe some few phrases about the background of my concept. You see, I was born in Damascus. I grew up in an Arab Islam. I traveled to Arab countries, like, Islam in Morocco is not Islam in Syria. But they resemble one another a lot, yeah? But there are differences. I mean, there's also cultural diversity within Islam. The first time in my life that I lived in a non-Arab, Islamic country, that was in Senegal, 1982. I was there with two American friends. I mean, they were a couple, Afro-Americans. And in Africa, I'm white man. But if you come closer to me, you see I'm a yellow man. I'm Asian. Yeah? I'm not white skinned. Yeah? But in Africa, I'm a white man. And I was accepted in Senegal as a brother, in French, frère musulman. And the two Afro-Americans, they were devastated. They were rejected. They asked him, what is your religion? Because he said Christianity is the religion of white man. We are not Christians. They don't speak Arabic. They don't speak French. He said, what are you doing here? But you see, the skin, Africans are not racist. I lived in Africa. I know Africa very well. If you go in Africa, there's no racism in Africa. Africans are not racist because they accept you or refuse you on grounds of culture. I was accepted as a white, so-called white man in Africa, in Senegal, as a brother, and the two Afro-Americans were treated as zero, and they had to leave. And when I brought them to the airport, saying we're going back home to America, yeah? And I said, if you send Afro-Americans to Africa, they will be cured of. They say America is our home, yeah? Because in Africa they will not be accepted, yeah? Unless if they were part of the culture. So now, to come to the point. I lived in two brotherhoods, the Tijaniya and the other one. It's Qadriya, and I noticed rituals, cultural rituals, which are to me non-Islamic. And every time I said, "Ce n'est pas islamique," this is not Islamic, the answer was, "Mais c'est africain." This is African. This is our Islam. And I made the same experience in Indonesia. That means Islam in non-Arab environment, in Indonesia, in Senegal, in Nigeria, Islam has become part of the local cultures and is deviated from original Islam. But it is Islam, it's real Islam. Remember what I said, Durkheim, religion is fait social. And so, when I returned to Europe, that was 24 years ago, when I came back to Europe, I said, why Islam is alien in Europe, and why it is not alien, it's Arab Islam, what is not alien in Africa? The Africans were in a position to Africanize Islam. But why can't Europeanize Islam? Well, the context is different, migration, etc. is very complex. And 1992, I was invited by the French government, at that time, government and society, they used to believe in assimilation. Assimilation is a wholesale adjustment, and you renounce your origin. And this worked in the 19th century and early 20th century, but not since the flow of Islamic migration to Europe. And so the French abandoned, around 1990, abandoned the concept of assimilation, and adopted the concept of integration. And integration is restricted to civic values, the values of the French Constitution. You can do at home what you want, you can have Islamic identity, but in public life, you accept laïcité. Laïcité, separation between religion and politics, and citoyenneté, citizenship, as you are first a member of the French polity, and then by religion and Muslim. And I developed my concept of European Islam there with an African background. Yeah? And therefore, Muslims could have their identity, their culture, their ritual, but in public life, you are a French citizen or German citizen, and you accept the values of the Constitution. Actually, this is the same here in the United States. You can be whatever you want, but in public life, you are an American citizen, and you abide by the values of the Constitution. And therefore, I think if Europeans wanted, and if Muslims would cooperate, this would work. But this will take a generation or even two. But you have to start, and the start is not yet done. Yeah? The second question, of course, it is possible to distinguish between criticism and hatred. Like if you say, Jews undermine the world, and you bring the idea of world conspiracy of the Jews, and this is not criticism. I mean, like you can criticize on somebody, you can criticize misconduct, something wrong, but hatred, let's say, all Muslims are bad people, all Jews are bad people. This should not be allowed under the umbrella of freedom of speech.
Yeah, mine's a quick question.
Okay.
I also like your...
So I think because of the time limit, please ask a question and we'll take a second question as well. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I also like your presentation and your definitions and your subsets, the political and the cultural, religious breakdown, and the analogy between the Islam and Islamism and Judaism and Zionism. My question is this: you say that 90% of the Islam are Sunnis and 10% are Shiites. And you also say that similarly 90% are religious cultural Islam and 10% are political. Now, of the 10% political, do you have an idea of what the breakdown is of that is between Sunni and Shiite? Does it have proportional to the Islam?
So these are two different statistics, and I think they cannot be related to one another. Let me explain it.
I'm not saying that correlate. I'm trying to see if there's a correlation.
But you see, this is different. Like you see, if you look in Iran, 85% of the Iranians are Shiites. If you go to Iraq, 55% of the Iraqis are Shiites. If you go to Lebanon, 40% of the Lebanese are Shiites. If you come to my country of origin, Syria, only 11%. So this varies from one country to one country, but all Muslims in the world together, there are 1.6 billion people, but among these 1.6 billion people, the Shiites are about 150 to 160 million. This makes about 10%. But this 10% of Shiites exist in different proportions throughout the world. And
how about Europe?
in Europe, it's also in there are no exact statistics about this in Europe. But from one country to one country, like in UK, there are almost no Shiites at all, maybe 1 or 2%. In Germany, maybe 5-6%. So it differs from one country to another country. So the decent people, I said 90% of the Muslims are decent people. These decent people include Shiites and Sunnis as well. So this is as a decency is not related to Sunnah or Shia Islam. I'm a Sunni Muslim, but you see, there are tensions between Sunni and Shiis, and I keep this out, yeah, because, you know, some Sunnis don't like the Shiis, Shiis don't like the Sunnis. I do not subscribe to this.
Let's take a question here.
I'm not sure this is a question that has a short answer, but with the hope that there can, and it's apparent need that there can be some change in the mosques. I'm very interested in knowing what kind of organization the mosque has, how this extreme group got power in so many mosques.
This is the problem. I mean, this is a very good question, and this, believe me, because I consult politicians in Europe, and it is very, I mean, these politicians are intelligent people, but they are European, they're very Eurocentric. And that's why the problem is not intelligence, it's a view of the world. It is very difficult. I have not been successful. Like the President Minister